Morning, guys. I'm Dave Canterbury with Self-Reliance Outfitters and the Pathfinder School. What I thought we'd do today is I had a lot of questions about these UV5R Baofeng radios that I spoke to in my bug out bag video a few days ago. I'll try to put a link to that video, at least in the description box of this video, so you can go check that out if you haven't seen it. However, these UV5R radios are good radios for lots of reasons. I've discussed that in those videos. So if you go back to those videos and other UV5R videos I've done, it'll explain the advantages to those radios in an emergency situation. They have a large, wide capability of bands that you can communicate on and listen on from about 130 to 500 megahertz. So you have a wide variety of channels or frequencies that you can listen to get information if needed. The point with all of that is that to be able to use these radios correctly or to use them to your best advantage, there are some peripheral items that you probably should think about purchasing with that radio. We're going to talk a little about that today. Let's start off by talking about this UV5R radio in general. It comes with a small battery. I think it's 1800 milliamp battery on the radio when you buy it, and a standard rubber duck style antenna. This radio is about 25 or 30 bucks on Amazon. Now, the newer versions of this UV5R have been locked. So they only work on ham radio bands, 2 meters and 70 centimeters. However, there are lots of videos out there showing how to unlock that radio to get it back to its multi-band capability by simply pressing 3 buttons at the same time and turning the radio on. Does kind of a factory reset and opens up those bands again. However, in this context, we're talking about using this radio for emergency purposes only, unless we're just listening. Now, if you've got a ham license and you want to use this radio for ham communications, it is completely legal for that according to the FCC. If you choose to do other things like GMRS, MERS, FRS, those type things, it's a different story. However, I'll let you be the judge of how you use your own radio. This video is just to tell you how to get the most out of that radio, depending on what you're looking to do. So the first thing I would do is, like I said, this radio comes with a standard 1800 milliamp battery when you buy it. The battery is very easy. You just push a button in the back and you slide the battery off. You can buy larger batteries that are, I believe they're 3200 milliamps, 3800 milliamps for about 20 bucks, 25 bucks on Amazon. That will greatly lengthen the life of this radio, especially if you're transmitting on it. If you're only listening, it's not so bad. You probably get away with this small battery, but the larger battery gives you an advantage of being able to communicate longer. Now, there are other advantages to this larger battery. When you have the small battery on the radio, the only real way to charge this radio at that point is to put it in the cradle that's provided with the radio when you buy it. It comes with a few accessories, a belt clip, a lanyard, a cradle, a set of headphones that you plug into it that aren't great, a microphone that's pretty decent for what it is, and we'll talk about that as we go. However, to charge this radio, you must put it in the cradle to charge it. Now, if you purchase this extended battery has an outlet on it here, a banana clip outlet, and you can buy a charging cable off the internet that fits in that banana plug, just like this, and plugs into any USB device that you have, like a charging brick, a Jackery, anything like that, to recharge these batteries. So that's a bigger advantage of having this larger battery on here, is that you do not have to have the cradle anymore to charge. You can pretty much charge this thing on the fly. If you're carrying a brick in that cable, you can charge this battery, recharge the radio itself on the fly, in the woods and things like that, on the road. So that's a big advantage of this larger battery as well. Now, the next thing I would tell you is that because this radio has such a large capability of bands, this one rubber duck antenna that comes with this radio is not going to be sufficient to get you what you want on those other bands as far as good communication ability and receiving ability. So what you're going to want to do is, it's very simple. You just spin it counterclockwise and it comes off. The connector on this antenna is an SMA female connector. You have an SMA male connector on the radio. So if you buy a new antenna for this or a different antenna, You have to make sure that you get the right connection. And again, that's SMA female. Now, Nagoya has a couple different antennas that work really well with this radio. One of them is a 771, the other one's a 7071G. 771 is for ham radio, 2 meters, 70 centimeters. The 771G is for GMRS, which is up in that higher 400 megahertz range. And this antenna that you use for ham is not going to be the best at bringing in those frequencies and transmitting on those frequencies. So you need to match the antenna to your plan, and you may want more than one antenna. Now we'll talk about some external antennas here in just a minute as well, because there are some external antennas you can buy for this as well that will give you a little bit more range than just a normal rubber duck antenna would give you. And I talked a little bit on one of my videos about putting a counterpoise on the radio itself to increase the capability of the antenna, and that's going to buy you some as well, but it's not going to change the fact that you're still dictated really by the length of this antenna for the frequencies that you're going to talk on. So it's important that you get the proper antenna. The antennas that I use are either Nagoya 771, 771G, or on my Baofeng that I carry most days in my pack here at the school, I've got a signal stick antenna that's been changed over to a BNC adapter. And what that allows me to do is, it's got that same SMA adapter on it that plugs into the radio, but that's an adapter so that you can use a BNC connector to connect to the radio. That gives you a big advantage when it comes to external antennas that are off the radio, which we'll talk about in a minute. And it also is great for these signal stick style antennas because you can change them in and out. And this antenna is great for the ham radio bands, and that's why it's on this radio now, because that's what I generally use it for. Now, remember that these radios can also monitor weather frequencies and all of those types of things as well. So it's good to understand the capabilities of these radios before you buy one, or get to know them after you buy it. So now let's talk about real quick. We've talked about the battery. We've talked about the charging cable for a larger battery. We've talked about the antennas that you can plug onto the top of the radio as far as a standalone antenna. Now let's talk about an antenna that's kind of off the radio, but plugged into the radio. There's a couple different options there. You can buy these survival style roll-up ladder-based antennas, ladder wire antennas. You can buy these off Amazon fairly cheap. What you need to make sure of is that you have the right connector to plug into your radio. And so you're going to need an adapter of some sort, because it's going to come with PL239 on there, and you're going to want something that's going to change that over to whatever fits on your radio. So if your radio has a BNC adapter on it, like mine does on this one, you're going to want a BNC adapter so you can plug this antenna straight into the top of your radio. If it's SMA, you want the proper SMA adapter for that. So either way, you're going to want an adapter, and you're going to want to plug it into this antenna. Now, these antennas are also designed for different frequencies. So I have one here that's for the ham bands. I have another one in this bag that's a little bit wider that's made for GMRS. Again, you can buy these off Amazon. They're probably the most expensive part that you're going to buy in your little radio kit here is going to be that antenna, because that antenna is more expensive than the radio and the battery combined, but still not out of the realm of affordable for 90% of the population probably. All right, so that takes care of external antennas as far as those emergency ladder style antennas. You can also buy antenna kits from people like Pactenna. And this antenna is set up so that you can put so you can put horizontal antennas on here, or a vertical antenna. And you can attach this to any pole to get it up as high as you can get it. And then I've got two more small antennas here that go on there horizontally that are made for the ham bands again, and a lightweight BNC connection cable here that connects both to this and the radio. This is a more expensive type antenna, and maybe something that you don't really feel you need, and that's okay. It just gives me added versatility to have both of these in the kit at the same time, because they'll both fit in one of these small bags like this with any connectors and things that I need, a notebook and a pen. All of it fits really well inside this bag. So it's easy, portable to carry around with me. Now, once we have this kind of stuff, the next thing we want to think about is how do we program these radios if we're going to use them. because you're going to want to program the different channels into them that you plan to listen to. And there's a couple different ways to do that. So let me flip this camera around and we'll talk through that real quick too. Okay, so let's talk about this radio real quick. At the top of this thing, you've got your antenna, you've got a light, and you have an on-off switch. On-off and volume switch. Okay? On the side of it, you have a call and light button. You have a mono button here that monitors it, turns off the squelch.
Channel mode.
Put your squelch automatically at 0, as long as you're holding it down. And you have a push to talk button here. That's pretty simple. You have a VFO mode or frequency mode, and you have a channel mode.
Frequency mode.
So that's in frequency mode, where I can readily change these frequencies.
Channel mode.
This is channel mode, where I can dial in frequencies by using the up-down buttons on the keypad to change that. Let me get this thing to come back on here.
1.
So there's channel 1.
2, 3, 4.
And it's telling me what those channels are, so that I know.
2.
And so channel 2 is my local repeater. And then if I push the AB button, it will take me down to the lower frequency, which you can see I've got set up to monitor the local weather. So when I'm using this radio at the school, I can either monitor the repeater frequency that we use out here, or I can monitor weather, and it works out really well for that. So it's really easy to switch back and forth on those. On the other side of this thing, you have a plug-in, which we'll talk about in a minute, where you can plug in either your headset, your microphone, or programming cables, or a programming device that's Bluetooth. And we'll talk about both of those in just a minute. Other than that, this thing's pretty simple. Now, the menus are what get a little confusing on this. When you're going to program this radio for different things,
It was partly sunny.
when you're going to program this radio for different things, you're going to want to understand the menus if you're going to program it by hand. And really, when you go into the menu mode of this radio, you can see that it starts off and defaults to squelch is 0. And as you push these up and down, it will go to different menus. And there's a number of that menu and what it is at the top. All right? So that's pretty simple. Now, let's say that the most important menus are what you really are worried about, okay? And those are probably menu number 13, which gives you your tone in hertz. If you have a repeater that you're trying to program in that has tone, you'll need to select through that. So if you're going to select through that, let's go back to that real quick. If you're going to select through that, you're going to hit menu again, and that's going to drop you down. And then you can cycle through the different tones until you hit the one that you need. Then you hit menu again, and it'll tell you
CTCSF.
there you went down.
Confirm.
Now you confirmed. So once you go back up, you've confirmed that setting. All right? So from 13, we're going to go to number 25. So 13 and 25. 25 is going to be your shift, up or down. If you don't understand what that means, do a little bit of research. But you're going to shift to a different frequency to contact a repeater, and then it will shift back to a frequency to send your signal forward. And so there's a shift of plus or minus that you may need to program in here that we can do automatic if we're using programming software or our Bluetooth device. But if we're doing it by hand, we may have to plug that offset in, and you do it the same way. You would go
Menu.
to that offset, hit menu again, and it's either off or on. In this case, it's off right now, so we'll leave it there. Now let's go to the next menu option. If we had to plug in a shift, we would want that on. And now we're going to go to our offset, which is our shift, which is menu 26. So we went from 25 to 26. And then we're going to hit menu again
Frequency.
and use the keypad to enter what the offset is. Okay? And then go back to menu again to confirm. The last one we need to think about is number 27. And number 27 is our memory channel save. So whatever channel we want to save that to, we're going to go down in the menu.
Memory channel.
Decide what channel we want to save it to, and then go back up. Excuse me.
Confirm.
Go back up and confirm, and we're done. And now we can go out of menu by exiting, okay? And go back to where we were, which was in channel mode.
2, 3.
Go back to where I was as far as monitoring the local repeater, and the Weather Channel. It's really, really simple once you do it a few times. But those are the main menus you're going to want to worry about on the radio are 13, 25, 26, and 27. That'll get you there for programming things, getting them where you want them. Okay? Now, let's talk about programming this easier than navigating menus and punching in buttons. Okay, so you're going to, first of all, you're going to plug this cable into the side of your radio like we talked about. Go ahead and shove it in there good and hard. You can leave your radio on when you do this, not a big deal. Then you're going to turn your computer on. You're going to want a software called Chirp. And that software is free. So if we open that software up, and plug our radio in to our USB port. And this is just a Baofeng cable. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go File, Open, and it forces you to save the files before you're done. So I'm going to go to UV5R526, and I'm going to open that. And that's going to tell me every channel that's programmed on this radio already. And I can program them myself just by clicking on these and making changes to any of these columns, whether it is the tone, the offset, the channel, the transmission power, whether it's going to be high or low because you have multiple transmitting powers on some of these radios. So all of those things can be changed. Now, the good thing about this, especially for 2 meter and 70 centimeter, is you can see that I've got all of the FRS channels plugged into this radio. I have all the GMRS plugged in. I have the MERS plugged in. And I have the local weather plugged in. Now, this is really not meant to be a tutorial over the software for Chirp. There's plenty of available videos out there from people like Ham Radio Crash Course, Not a Rubicon. Those guys all have videos on this software. But a couple things this will allow you to do is you can go into the radio and you can reset the factory configurations if you want to by importing the stock configuration and writing it back to the radio by uploading it to radio if you screw things up. You can also import data from radio reference or repeater book, and it will give you the repeater book references here for your state if you have internet connection. And you can then plug those directly into empty spots in your memory and then upload to radio, and it will program the radio for you. And you can do all of those things without having to punch a bunch of buttons on the radio or worry about menus if you have this free software. It's Chirp, C-H-I-R-P. Again, it's free software. So you got to buy the cable. It's about 25 bucks from Baofeng on Amazon, and then get the Chirp software for free, and you can program your radio with that. So that's one way of programming this radio without having to mess with all the buttons or remember the menus. Now, there's another device out there from a company called TID Radio, and I've got this turned on. Doesn't really need to be turned on. But anyway, what you can do with this is you can plug it into the radio, just like you do the other connections, snap it in tight, turn the Bluetooth on, and you can then pair it with your phone, but my phone is filming this, so I can't show you that. But you can pair this with your phone, download an app, which is free for your phone, and this will also allow you to import things like repeater book and program the radio from your phone. It's not as extensive as the Chirp software is, I don't think, in many ways, but it will allow you to program repeaters and things like that kind of on the fly and right to the radio without having to push a bunch of menu buttons. And this thing is, again, about 25 bucks or something like that's what that costs. And it's rechargeable. Comes with a recharging cable that plugs into it right here so that you can charge it up, and you can just carry this device with you if you've got it charged up and you've got an internet connection. It's not a problem. Again, both of these kind of require your phone to have an internet connection. So it's really good to be able to understand how to program this thing by hand in case you have to do something on the fly and you've got a copy of repeater book in your hand, but you have no way of connecting to the internet. You can program all that stuff by hand if you need to. You can also print frequencies and things off the internet for weather, GMRS, MERS, local EMS services, all those types of things, and then plug those in by hand on the fly if you need to. So it's good to understand the menus, but it's also good to have things that make it easy to program if you can as well in your kit. And again, either one of these things is between 20 and 25 bucks. I would suggest you have both. Okay, guys, I really appreciate you joining me for this video today for just a quick overview of what I think you should have for a Baofeng handheld radio if you decide to go that route. Now, you know, Baofeng radios are cheap, and because they're cheap, they're cheap. If you lose it, drop it, crush it, smash it, whatever, it's cheap to buy another one. If you've got software already loaded and saved, it's easy to reprogram that thing right back to where you started. So it's a pretty simple system, and they do seem to be pretty good radios from what I've seen so far. Now, with that said, the last thing I'll say in this video before we sign off is that, you know, a lot of people balk at getting a license, so either a GMRS license or a ham radio license. I have both myself. And the reason for that is because I know that in an emergency, it doesn't matter. I can talk on any band I want to, and nobody's going to say a word in an emergency scenario. However, understanding how to do that requires practice, requires trials. It's just like making a boat or a fire, or anything else. You don't want to wait till you have to do it to try and do it. And to be able to do it legally when it's not an emergency, you need to buy the license. That will allow you to test different antenna setups, different radio setups, different frequencies, different communication techniques, repeaters, non-repeaters, repeaters or, you know, simplex, all those types of things. And then it may interest you into getting into things like HF as well. But for the time being, you know, this should give you a good overview of the accessories that I think somebody should have that's going to use Baofeng radios either in, you know, an off-roading or overlanding scenario, a scenario with a group of people, teaching at a school where you need communication with other people all the time for emergencies, if you're out away from a base camp location, a hunting camp, all those types of scenarios are good reasons to have handheld radios. And these radios do a fine job. I appreciate your views. I appreciate your support. I thank you for everything you do for our school, for our family, and for our business, for all our sponsors, instructors, affiliates, and friends. And I'll be back with another video as soon as I can, guys. Thanks.